Hi, I'm Dr. Gordon Ressler, the president and founder of Robots in Space. And if you want to get the latest in space technologies and business, listen to the Cold Star Project.
This show is for entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be what is termed professional advice. The Cold Star Project is proudly presented by the Operational Excellence Society. Cold Star Tech is a supporter of the OPEX Society, and Jason Kanigan is a member of its board of advisors. Talk with us at Cold Star Tech to find out more about the OPEX Society and what we can achieve together in your organization, or just visit opexsociety.org. Thanks for joining us for today's show. You know, we had a guest on recently who moved from Germany to Australia and transplanted himself there and has done very well in the space industry. Today's guest did the exact opposite. He started out in Australia and has moved to Germany and has done very well there. His name is Simon Drake. He and I have had a couple of really great conversations about the strategic space value chain thought. Every venture capitalist worth their salt is interested in capturing as much of the supply chain. So he's got a few ideas that he's working on for that. He's the CEO of something called the Lunar Resources Registry, which could fill a gap in the international legal area about who has what on the moon. He's the CEO of something called the Space Commodities Exchange, which is trying to solve this problem that we're going to talk about today. How do the regular members of the public invest in space? And of course, he's the managing director, co-founder, and partner at Space Ventures Investors, not to be confused with Space Ventures, which is with Brent Arsenault and Aaron there. And those guys, they know each other and they play well together. But this is Space Ventures Investors with Simon Drake. So let's get into a really great conversation here. Simon is very knowledgeable, and like I said, we've had a couple of sort of off-camera, deep-level conversations, which I've enjoyed tremendously. Simon, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. So let's jump right into it. What is your vision of regular people being able to invest in space?
My vision of regular people investing in space is that they have a more direct input into space ventures that have definite targets. So at the moment, theoretically, as a shareholder in a listed company, you can invest in space by investing in a company that has a fleet of satellites, or you could be a shareholder of Virgin Galactic. But my ultimate vision is that people are backing companies that are listed or private that have definite goals which are kind of beyond what we already have at the moment, or different operations, for example, a Lunar Mining or something like that.
Okay. And so can one investor really make a difference?
Depends how big their ticket is. And that's always been the case, I think, with if you look at the big, billionaires boys club that, kicked off, and we now know them as SpaceX and, Blue Origin, they've really made a difference, but they came from a .com era, wealth, where they amassed a certain amount of wealth and on companies that generate that wealth that enabled them to pivot into space. As for a smaller individual investor, I think a high net worth investor can make a difference to a new startup because they can bring along a sizable seed investment to a new startup, but also that sizable seed investment gives that space startup more confidence to go ahead and approach other investors. Down the line, when you get to retail investors, I don't think one retail investor makes a difference, but it is when you put them all together, they do make a difference because people are proud of their investments when they're doing well. So if you have retail investors saying, I've invested in something unique, they'll gladly talk to people about it. And spreading the word is a really important thing about space investing because there's a lot of confusion about it. And that's what a lot of my work is investor education.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, let's take a side step to that. What kind of confusion do you most commonly see about space investing?
I think it's first of all, there's the visual. And some people, they say that their first memory of space is, the Apollo landings and, astronauts on the moon. My first memory of space is a space shuttle blowing up on the television news, and that was in 1986. So that was my first kind of like visual cue of what this was about. Since then, things have moved on, and media has moved on. So there's this kind of misconception that it is highly risky and things blow up. Now, the thing is, it is highly risky and things do blow up. But on the other side, you look at the stock market crashes that have come and gone. There's risk anyway, and things blow up. It could be a biotech company, it could be any kind of company. So that's one number one confusion. Second confusion is that it's quite easy to make a space company. It's not. It's built on decades, generations of skill going into making space technology, and then because we're dealing with the commerce side of space commerce, then you have to find a proper business model. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. To pull in the capital to make the operation of a business. And today, only the large satellite companies have really managed to do that.
Yeah, that's something I can echo, Simon, having talked to many commercial side of space founders, is that business model is just not there. It's missing. They have a wonderful idea, technology that may work out, may not, but it's finding the customers and then creating a revenue model that covers costs and produces a profit. As simple as that sounds, again, not present in most of the conversations that I've had. So. So you're part of an organization that works with investing. Tell us a little bit about, without pitching, obviously, some of the things that you have done and been involved in.
As an individual or as part of our company?
Both is fine.
Okay. As an individual, I came to this from having worked in different areas like in investment banking and marketing and small businesses, and also share trading. So I brought a whole toolkit of skills to this. And when we founded Space Ventures Investors, our task was really to work out our roadmap and work out who our target investors were, and work out what, in this case, space startups we wanted to be invested in. So fortunately, for the last few years, I was part of the Copernicus program in Europe, selecting startups, Earth observation startups for funding in Europe. And that enabled us to leverage that skill acquired to invest at early stage into Earth observation startups. And for me, that's something that's really tangible as a downstream space business, because you get a good idea of who the target market is. You're not dealing with complete high-level business concepts, which we'll get to next. So yeah, Earth observation is kind of a stable thing. It's well understood, and there's a lot more room to maneuver. Like when you think of the immense power you have with a simple Google Maps app on your smartphone compared to 20 years ago. Now, if you think of that, magnification of power and information. If we go ahead 2 years of think of how much more information you'll have on a Maps app. And I think that's the goal where Earth observation is making inroads. On the other side, because I'd come from worked in many different industries, I also knew that investors wanted space resources. So we spent a lot of our time working out space resources, business models, and going back to the basics of what makes a space resources business model. Once you carve away all the flashy concept of where we'll be in 100 years, you have to say, well, where are we going to be in 10 years, and how can I make something now that it will get us there?
Right. Yeah, because we've got that shorter investor window, 8, 10, 12 years at the top where they need their money back. And there's only a few folks out there who have a longer time horizon.
That is true, but what I found is from the data we've received from our space investing surveys, a lot of investors factor in a long-term 10-year return on investment horizon with high risk, but at the same time they kind of see that as something like almost like a side bet, I think, at this stage.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not like, well, thank God no one's, putting, 100% or 50% of their portfolio in it. That'd just be way too much responsibility. But I can really see that when I talk to, retail investors, they're putting in something small, but it's still significant, because when you accumulate it all, then you can actually start doing things with it.
Okay, and I liked some words that you just said, like survey, and customers, investors, actually finding out data rather than guessing or imagining, running a little mental movie in your head of what you would do. And so, yeah, to this point, we've got accredited investors; they can go and invest and whatnot. But what is stopping regular members of the public from being able to invest in space companies?
Regulation. That is one thing. Education, that's another. I think regulation is a necessary burden of paperwork, because it actually screens out the people who are doing it on a whim. This is what I find, is that when you abide by regulation and you keep it in focus, it just helps makes the process a lot more transparent. But back to regular smaller investors, I mean, they can partake in things like, there might be an equity crowdfunding raise for a company outside the US jurisdiction. I know the US has the different regulation than the UK and Europe and so on. But the big question is, if you're a potential space investor, where do you go? You really have to look around. And I think recently there's been a growth in funds that kind of have a basket of stocks, but I actually don't think that they're that pure space, because a lot of time a fund with a basket of stocks has just got your big aerospace companies in there who have a small space business relative to their aerospace. Do your own research, and I think, because space is a growing industry, it's also very exciting, because you can find these companies and be part of the experience, so to say.
Okay. Well, that is another question, I guess, as how are members of the public, even if they could pass through some sort of regulatory entrance to be able to invest in these companies, how can they find them? Because we know that these small commercial space businesses that are just starting up haven't figured out their business model, so their positioning isn't that great, and they're not good at marketing, and they'll be the first to tell you they're not great at it.
Yeah, this is a really good point, and that's how we came in, because we recognize that on the one side you might have a lot of small investors. On the other side, you've got a few space startups that need seed funding, or Series A or Series B. Now, a space startup is usually run by, let's just say that they're very academic and technical, and that marketing is not their number one skill set, and why should it be? And also, they don't want a lot of retail investors on their cap table, or listed as small minority shareholders, because it makes things a bit problematic later when they want to deal with a fund or a strategic investor. So for us, we decided, well, let's position ourselves in the middle, where we can raise capital from regular investors and funnel that to space startups that need it, and where we actually know the management and understand what the business model is, and can keep an eye on it. But I think this industry is growing as it is, and it'll take innovation to really get there too.
Okay, yeah, because it's launch. Once again, launch is the most visible part of the thing for the public. They see that it's inspiring and whatnot, but it's just one piece of it, right? There's so much more that they can invest in, and that's where that education comes in, I guess. So what do you do as far as educating these folks at this point, and where do you want to take that?
My shift on education goes back to the data that we were getting in about potential space investors was actually shaped our direction. I noticed that about 40-50% of potential investors, they given the choice between normal space commerce and space resources, they would want space resources, and some really want asteroid mining. Now asteroid mining is like way out there, like pardon the pun, and that is probably going to be up for our children or grandchildren and their robot friends. So but to me, this kind of investor appetite for space resources was a case to build a business, and it actually inspired me to form a spin-off company called the Lunar Resources Registry, which looked at something like the lunar surface as if it was a mining operation. Now, under space law, you can't own anything on the lunar surface, so we'll just get that out of the way. But countries do allow, under their space mining laws, a way that you can extract resources, and then that has a commercial value. So how I got there was by going back to the data and seeing that people actually wanted to invest in these kind of in space resources. And then it was a case of finding a space resources business model which was possible and achievable. And that got me to talking to a lot of people in the space resources community, that the supply chain to make, let's call it a lunar resources operation, to make a supply chain to make that possible, it exists, but obviously a lot of it doesn't exist, or it needs to be, take existing mining equipment and harden it and work out how to survive a lunar night and so on.
Yeah, it's I feel like Dylan Taylor and Voyager is moving in that direction with their capabilities. But yeah, the sharp lunar regolith eating up gaskets and things like that, you've got to alter the equipment a little bit and be able to fix things or replace things out there.
Yeah, it's an engineering challenge that when you go into it and you go through the checklist of things which are out to kill you. I think that the engineering challenge is part of the allure of it as well. Like people look at the moon and they go, oh, "Isn't that beautiful?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah." It's a dangerous place,
right? And it is trying to murder you in your sleep.
Yeah,
yeah. I see where you're going with that.
And if you go to sleep there, will you wake up?
Yeah. Well, that's and we've got a lot of research on there. Dr. Paul Van Suzante, who was a guest on the show recently, his students won an award for what they're doing with lunar rovers and that. So there are always advancements going on. We're getting pieces of this stuff. However, here's a worry that I have. How do we avoid having space investment by the public turn into this free-for-all driven by hype? And we see this like with Bitcoin right now, let's say. Actually, over the last several years, that's happened a few times.
It's a strange thing because obviously space investing is nowhere near the hype of any of the other hypes, and space investing could very well benefit from the hype. If you look at the .com hype, that capital that was raised that enabled the building of communication hubs and infrastructure, which enabled us to have the digital revolution. Now, if you invested in something like pets.com or something, that's another story. But after the hype comes, the hangover, and then comes the rebuilding of particular industries. I don't think space investing will have that hype because it's not such an instantaneous result. For example, a social media company can say, "Oh, we're growing in eyeballs or users, double every day, blah blah blah," and they have a hockey stick growth, and everyone's excited. With the space commerce business models and space resources business models, it takes years to plan, years to build, years to put together. there can't be I don't think there's room for this kind of speculation because tomorrow might be different than today. Or I might, some investor might think, oh, I can double my money in 6 months. I just don't think that's going to happen because a lot of these space business models take so many years to play out. And, on the way, you're going to have accidents and delays. Yeah, but even then, it would be interesting if there was even just a mini hype, just to kick things off. Like
Okay.
Human investing behavior is a beast of its own.
Yeah, and we've seen this in the past where, well, there's an example of a business model where there was money being put in from the homeland kind of thing by members of the public, and they were sending out ships and taking a very long time, right, years perhaps, to go out to the other side of the world. This was clearly in a time with sail power that I think we should discuss here.
Yes,
because I think there are some parallels between that and what we might see in space investing.
Yeah, the background is that Sir Isaac Newton got his fingers burnt in the South Sea bubble, which was a bubble based on the South Sea Stock, which was a company that was given a privilege by the British government to trade. Now, because it was given this privilege by the British government, investors dived in, and if you look at the chart, which is thanks to Mark Faber, from the Gloom, Boom, and Doom report, you can see when Newton enters, and he exits happy. His friends get rich. He re-enters into this bubble, and then when it blows up, he enters broke. And his final quote from this is, "I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people." Now, what we see in I won't mention certain asset classes, but they seem to me like they're in a bubble. And because I'm now 45, I have the benefit of, I don't know, maybe 25 years of observing human behavior and the markets. And so if I can sense a bubble, I can't really share that with people who, if it's their first time. Yeah.
So that, they're going to miss the signals and maybe buy into the hype a little much. So what is the warning, I guess, that we can take away from that South Sea example for people today?
There's so many warnings that I think the real signal of a warning is that I guess it's back to fear of missing out. This is a human sentiment, and from an investor point of view, it's one of the things you really have to conquer. I find with investing, personal investing, I'll just talk about that, is you have to deal with yourself before dealing with the market. And the market these days is, you could almost say, well, it's different this time. And interesting enough, I just finished reading Reminiscences of a Stock Operator, which is probably written about 100 years ago. And I was reading sections of it thinking, this sounds like cryptocurrencies. Just how particular investment things are marketed, and word of mouth, amplifies a certain element of an investment, and how people go about making their decisions. So we've been there before. We're in it again. How does it work with space investing? I think that we have to go through a next market crash or bubble popping, or maybe the market goes up and up, and then something calamitous happens, like there's a currency revaluation. I think we're going to have to go through a bit of a storm before space investing will go into phase 2, where it becomes more mainstream. I think people are going to have to get out of their system this attraction with social media, cryptocurrencies, and it'll just take time, and we have time. So
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess as a continuation from those observations, then, are there any unexpected results that you would predict happening from opening up space investing to members of the public?
Yes, it would be. They would probably vote with their feet and their dollars, and it would be a case of the entrepreneurs being able to present realistic projects and realistic goals that captures the imagination of the people in order to invest accordingly. So, and it would be interesting to see what business models that the people really want. For example, you could say, we're going to build, better satellite constellations, or we're going to mine resources on the dark side of the moon or something like that. Or we're going to have a Mars colony as even though that's far out in terms of time. It'd be interesting to see what people want to put their money into, because the crowds have their own ability to change history and destiny. Will it work? I don't know. I think at the moment, for myself, when I'm dealing with, coming up with business models and trying them with space investors, is, we just try and work out what's practical near term and illustrate that, rather than going for the larger, bigger picture, because the bigger picture is just a bit too far out there.
So, I mean, how do you reconcile that? Because you've done the survey, you got the data, they say asteroid mining, resources, that's what we want. And then you have to temper that with, well, okay, but that's not happening in the next 2 years or 5 minutes, in perception time. How do you get them to the next step and say, look, and that's the education function, I guess. Say,
yeah.
Look, to proceed to that, we need to develop these capabilities. So I recommend you invest in these companies. Is that the approach, or is it going to be something different?
Yeah, no, that is the approach, where if you look at something like asteroid mining, you can actually build a business out of it, but it's more related to the data behind the asteroids. But you couldn't realistically create a company that says they're going to capture an asteroid and mine it, because that's too far away. I don't know if the technology even exists to do that.
Momentous is probably closest.
Yeah, I mean, they're all trying. They're all trying for it. But realistically, it comes down to what's achievable now and what the roadmap is, and not to get too far away. And one of the fears I have is that if the space commerce community is presenting grand ideas, and let's say there's 5 of them, and they're all well-intentioned, and let's say one idea has a spectacular failure, and the media gets hold of it, then the whole space commerce investing community suffers, because the media loves a failure,
Yeah, repeat it a million times.
Repeat it a million times.
Yeah. No, and our engineering advisor, Dr. Rick Fleeter, he's got way more experience than I do, and he's the one who's always telling me, look, 20 years ago this happened, right? There was a flowering of the space industry, a little bit, things look good, and then suddenly it collapses, 100,000 people laid off, not an exaggeration, and we're back to square one for a long time, right? So yeah, it looks good now. We need to scatter some seeds and plow some rows and get some wins here, some very public wins that we can talk about too. And like you say, that the grandiose or big picture ideas are wonderful, but we also need small successes on the way that say, look, we developed this kind of infrastructure, or we actually have the capability to do this chunk of it now. And that may not be as sexy or exciting to read about in a magazine article or something, but I think that's what we need to invest in.
Yeah, it's funny because actually things do move in practical manners. For example, the latest space renaissance for want of a better word, has really been about the, something like SpaceX really is the cheerleader of them all. And the goal is, cheaper access to space. And the question is, okay, well, if they provide that, and hopefully, they continue to do that, and other players can do it as well, then the next generation of entrepreneurs has to provide the next pasture or the next green field. And what do you do with that cheap access to space?
Yeah.
And from my research, it's, well, number one is space debris, is making sure that that issue is dealt with. Rather than just monitoring space debris, someone will have to actually start cleaning up defunct satellites. And then the next thing you can do with cheaper launch is, and with the existing technology, is say, well, where's our next destination? And for me, I think in my life, the next destination is the moon. It's not that far away. It's been studied, and it's a destination for us. It's an inescapable destination as well. Like, there's no use trying to skip past it on the way to Mars. Maybe I think Mars is something for our children's generation, children's children. But I think for this period in time, it really is about getting to dealing with the harsh environments of the lunar surface in order to make operations that work there in the system to go back and forth.
Yeah, and normalizing that, right, where it's just normal to get on a transport and go to the moon, and we've got a group of people there permanently, and are doing work there, and some sort of economic benefit too. I personally have never bought into the idea of, oh, we should just go there and create science labs. That's not enough, as far as I'm concerned, of a compelling reason. We need to actually go create something.
Yeah, it is a tricky one, because I'm one of the co-founders of the Space Commodities Exchange based in the US, and our goal is to have orbiting terminals between Earth and the moon. And part of the business model is working out the value of commodities that come from the lunar surface, like say water as a great one. And how much it would be worth to bring it back into like a geosynchronous orbit. So the economics of having operations on the moon that are outside tourism and strictly science is still being developed. And we're still trying to work out, like the killer business model that says, okay, we want to go to the moon and it might be helium-3. I don't know. I spent my last lockdown period looking at maps of the moon, thanks to data from NASA, and just trying to work out, what is the secret to the moon? What resources can we extract from it that help us on our way to other places, and how can that fit in right now, or the next 10 years, into a commercial system?
Yeah. The idea that if we had some sort of infrastructure there, that we could pull out certain resources and bring them back to Earth orbit cheaper than throwing them out of the Earth gravity well, that's pretty interesting. It is a secondary thing though, because those resources then have to be used, right? So there has to be something going on in Earth orbit that requires that fuel or those resources. It's like, and we're in that 0 to 1 phase right now, where it's a little hard to imagine what's going to happen. But as soon as we get to 1, we're going to get to like 3 or 5 really quickly, I think, where everyone's going to go, oh, it's obvious. Now we're doing this. Now we create X in Earth orbit and bring that back down, or do something else with it that makes money. And that, I think, is the key, is figuring out what is that primary economic driver, and then we can get other things to fuel it. But that's definitely the hard part.
That is something that I've been trying to focus on. Is you need a destination, you need a structure. As a great example is if the destination and the structure is some kind of orbiting infrastructure space station or some kind of base on the moon that's built from, let's just say, metals extracted from the lunar surface. It might be in situ resources utilization as one example. Now, to build that structure, to refine regolith, to get the metals out of it, these are all complicated processes of a very long supply chain. And the question I have is, is it up to our space agencies to come up with this destination? Like where do we go after the International Space Station?
Yeah.
Do we go to a lunar space station? Is it going to be big enough to warrant actively processing regolith for metals in order to build it or build a lunar base? And what I have a funny feeling is space agencies, they can only do so much, because at the end of the day, they are tied to governments, and governments are tied to voters. And trying to convert all voters into space infrastructure spenders
it's a tough.
It's a fool's errand. So therefore, the question I have is, we've seen this, insatiable appetite for cryptocurrencies, which I don't want to get in, a fist fight with, the Bitcoin fanatics, but as far as I'm concerned, it's just still bytes, buzzing around on your USB stick. What happens if we had that fanatism in investing targeted on a structure that was off-world, that in order to build required rolling out a supply chain that includes resource extraction from the lunar surface? And this kind of concept, I think, is slowly kind of creeping into the space investor mindset, that if you want things as bold and shiny as, rockets, investing in launch is gone. It's the train has left the station. But the next thing is, I think, will be a structure that's in space or on the lunar surface, that's commercial, that's big enough and scalable, that it enables us to raise enough money to build it using existing financial instruments. It might be a listed company, or it might be bonds related to it. I'm not sure. But what it does is, it's a commercial orientated structure. Therefore, it's funded by investors. It's not reliant on space agencies. It's not reliant on committee decisions from governments, because they've got enough going on at the moment. So I really think that the private investor will play an important part in the next big leap.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, we've got all these pieces, right? You've got Bill Kemp and United Space Structures that can build something like that on the moon. You've got Dan Faber with the gas stations in space idea. You've got Astroscale able to do the orbital cleanup. So all these, and there are other organizations that can do pieces of these things. Those are the three that are top of my mind, though, when it comes to those particular topics. So. But there's that need for that economic driver that I see, though, that primary, like, what the heck are we doing, right? We're not just going to go out there to build a structure on the moon because we feel like it, right?
Yeah. Or it's a casino.
The sentiment is gone, right? Although honestly, a casino, there's a known business model there, and it does have a lot of cash flowing through it. So that might actually be better than a lot of other ideas. But I think we've really got to discover that primary motivator, that what are we going to create that adds value, right? That creates value.
That's
going to drive everything else.
Yeah, the interesting driver could be is that as we, first of all, I'm not an environmentalist and I'm not trying to play that card, but what I have noticed is when you follow through with the environmental mindset, and my theory is, well, why dig up a rainforest for rare earth metals? And, whether it's an open cut mine or whatever. Well, an open cut mine is a great example. But why do that on Earth when you can do it on the lunar surface, and more conveniently do it on the dark side of the moon, the far side of the moon, where there are metals. It's just a completely different environment, completely different mining techniques, and completely different geology. All we have to do is get our head around all that and raise the capital to do it. But it actually saves Earth from being mined. I mean, why do we do it when we can do it somewhere else? And there is no rainforest on the moon, unless, if I'm wrong, tell me. So.
Well, interesting concept, yeah. And again, all those engineering things, the temperature and that. Having talked to many lunar mining experts, everything seems to be upside down or backwards. Whatever you think of as normal on Earth, as far as mining goes, just flip your head around and it's the opposite, and you're probably in a good spot to start off with. But yeah, I kind of like that idea. I think environmentalists will go, well, we shouldn't be doing it anywhere anyway. But I don't know. I like my stuff.
We love our stuff. And we can't go back to the 18th century where your prime your prime asset was a cow called Daisy, or now people's prime asset is a house or a car or an electric vehicle which has a lot of metals in it. But back to resources on the moon, because it's close, the economics driving it. It could be interesting to see how the economics kind of turn the screws on mining companies here on Earth, and they say, oh well, we need these things, but the cost to go to space and do that is 100 times what it costs on Earth. Now, what happens if you have a strange interplay where an emerging superpower or power, I won't mention any names, corners the rare earth metals market, and then
does it begin with C and end with a vowel?
Could be. So what happens when they corner the market and another country that starts with an A and also ends with a vowel, realize that their supplies, has been diminished, and they suddenly realize, well, hang on, we've got a new generation of space enthusiasts. We have cheaper launch. We have these expensive programs that need to be used. All that would then be required is political will. Now, this is something completely different, because if a space infrastructure was built purely on commercial grounds, it would take a very high valuation for said resource. But if the politics got involved and they said, all right, we're going to do it because we need a destination. We're sick of complaining about each other. We're sick of, rewriting the rules on politics, and we want and we don't want to have a war because, that's just a waste. Let's go to the moon. That would be interesting.
Yeah. I like that idea. National honor, that sense of freedom and not being tied to another organization or entity or country for a source of supply. That's very interesting, because the profit motive is not there. You don't even need to make money in that situation. It's nice if you do, but break even is fine to get out of that situation of having somebody's boot on your neck about this particular topic.
That, and also this has been done before. This kind of concept is not new. It's probably the reason the Roman Empire existed. The British Empire was all about going overseas, getting resources. It's so the French were in it, the Spanish were in it, Portuguese, the Dutch, and the funny thing is they all had, at the peaks of their empires, they had the reserve currency status. And it was based on solid trade and obviously a gold silver standard. So yeah, I think if it's a political initiative, it'll have to be tied to an economic initiative, and then then the horses are out of the gate. But for us, in the real world of space business modeling and investing, we just make sure that we're building the supply chain anyway. We're building the business models anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's no use waiting for a political decision maker to arise from the ashes of today's chaos.
Yeah, and the fashion of the moment. Yeah, because
Yeah.
that's very fickle, and yeah, because I've noticed things that are, we can't possibly do that, suddenly can become, well, obviously we're doing it. When that fickle will comes around, but waiting around, for that ignition to happen is a waste of time. So, okay, so Simon, let's wrap up. But so I want you to say the organization again that you work for and have founded. You've actually got a couple. How people can get a hold of you, and what kind of person or what kind of situation that they're in that makes sense to reach out to you.
Okay. First of all, I'm the co-founder of Space Ventures Investors. We're registered in the UK. I'm also one of the co-founders and CEO of Space Commodities Exchange, that's registered in the US. And just this year, I'm the co-founder and CEO or Geschäftsführer of Lunar Resources Registry, which is based in Germany and which is entering a European Space Agency Business Incubation Center next month. So we're still waiting on a final signature. These kind of 3 different kind of businesses all come together with one theme, and it is driving towards space resources. Space Ventures Investors is a shareholder-driven company, and if you're a retail investor and you want to enter into it, we're always open to talking to people when we do a capital raising. On the other side, if you want to dip your toes in space investing, I can urge people to have a look at all the different kind of space stocks out there, because they're tradable, liquid, and the deeper you go down that rabbit hole, it gets it from a technological point of view. It gets very exciting and interesting to see what these different companies are doing. Now, because they're not always on the NASDAQ, it might be difficult to trade them. But it's the research is half the fun, and trying to understand where what they're doing and why they're doing it. Now that's a good way to get in as well.
Okay, and I want to make it clear that your company is Space Ventures. There is also a Space with a D Ventures, which is a different organization. You guys are friendly.
We do talk.
And Aaron. And so check out the link in the description below, and that'll get you to Space Ventures.
Investors.
right. Different organizations. And
we're really original with our domain names.
Right.
Well, but we were one of the first we set up Space Ventures Investors about 10 years ago. So we've been watching the change in mentality towards space investing, which was it has come such a long way. And
yeah, well, I really get that, Simon, because I feel that same perceptive groping towards a solution. Try to, data's coming at you, and you go out and you find more, and you try to like I view it as like you get a camera and the lens is out of focus, and you're slowly turning that focus wheel right around to get that picture into sharp focus. And then when it is in focus, or at least in focus enough, then that's the moment where you get the business model. And you're like, all right, I have my target. I know what we need to do here. And then we can go out and do it. And to get there before everyone else is the goal, obviously. And I know from talking with you, off camera, that you've spent a lot of time looking, and we've mentioned it, like you said, during the last lockdown, at pieces of this puzzle and going, what is the deal here? Like,
yeah, what is the deal?
What are we trying to accomplish, or what's the engine? And so I'm excited about that. So thanks for doing this. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, and can I put one more thing in? The most interesting thing I've found about the space community is that for the younger generation, who are, you know, bright, have incredible access to information, it's great for them because it is a growth industry, and they will see more of it than you and I will because they're younger, you know.
They're used to it, yeah.
So if you're young, you know, and it's great to get into because it'll be with you for, you know, forever.
Indeed. All right, Simon Drake, Space Ventures, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Thanks for tuning in. If you're interested in working with us at Cold Star Tech, here are some of the things that we can help with. There's a lot of people who talk about process, documentation control, attention to detail, all this stuff. We help organizations become true learning organizations. Remember, if something isn't written down or recorded in some way that's accessible, searchable, findable, it didn't happen. It might as well not have happened. So if you have two people who solve a problem, a serious problem in your organization, but they do so in isolation and nobody finds out about it, which happens all the time, then it didn't really happen and nobody else can access that wisdom. So we unlock wisdom for your organization. We do a lot of things in the space industry. We have access to regulatory and legal officials who can help you, if you're a space industry founder, find out what areas of regulation and compliance do you need to be, you know, working with, compliant with. And we find a lot of folks don't even know about some of these areas. They don't even know that they exist. Can you imagine how you're going to stumble and stub your toe and really screw up your organization's timetable if you don't know about these things? So come and talk to us. We've got great relationships with the right people, especially in the United States and in England, and we'll be able to help you with that. And so when it comes to process improvement, whether that's some sort of business documentation, business development roles, wow, have I seen some things in business development. You got founders out there who all they're doing is quoting on projects. This is a mistake. You are wasting your energy bidding on things that most of which you never even had a chance of winning in the first place. I've seen people bankrupt themselves bidding on everything, or bidding on only these high-end things and not realizing that you need to have a strategy so that this bidding process pays for itself. I mean, you got to learn how to screen here. And this is not something that they teach you in school. I had to learn it myself, so don't feel bad about it, but come talk to us about it, okay? So either it's on the business process side or the actual manufacturing of physical goods. That kind of process improvement. You can come talk to us. Can this be done faster, cheaper, better? And yes, most of the time it sure can, because people just do stuff, and the first person to invent the way of doing things is the person who gets to choose most of the time how things are done. This happens all over the place. I like to point out our traffic signals for automobiles are based on the way that they ran railway traffic 100 years before that, okay? So, and this is key in the space industry right now, which is new, right? This is an area that I personally am interested in. How we figure out how to do stuff today is going to impact generations, because people are so easily locked into this is how we've always done it. And if you hear that at your organization, there's a warning bell. This is how we've always done it. You need to come talk to us at that point, okay? So reach out to us. It's easy to do. Just message me on LinkedIn or email me at jason@coldstartech.com. I want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.